So let me get this straight. The same administration that caged kids, banned Muslim countries, and told asylum seekers to kick rocks made an exception for white South African farmers. Look, it's no problem with me personally, but it's not because they were in unique danger, not because they had nowhere else to go, but because they checked the box this country's always been most protective of. In 2018, Trump signaled that white farmers from South Africa should be granted refugee status, echoing far-right talking points about a so-called white genocide. No credible evidence, no official crisis, just a recycled myth repackaged as humanitarian concern. And while people fleeing gang violence in Guatemala or political collapse in Haiti were being criminalized, deported, or left to rot in detention centers, suddenly white landowners with bank accounts and citizenship were being framed as the vulnerable ones. Meanwhile, the same South African government, being painted as the aggressor, was still recovering from decades of apartheid, a system that left the country's black majority with little to no land, generational wealth, or power. But when that same government tries to redistribute land, it becomes persecution. Funny how the idea of fairness only feels like violence when you're used to owning everything. To understand how we got here, you have to go back. Not just to Trump, but to the lie he amplified in the system that made it possible. After apartheid ended in South Africa in the 1990s, white South Africans still controlled the majority of farmland and wealth. It was never really a level playing field, but when the South African government started talking about land redistribution to fix that imbalance, far-right media twisted it into a horror story about white genocide. And that term, a full-on conspiracy theory, got traction with American extremists, white nationalists, and eventually Fox News. It didn't matter that there was no actual genocide. What mattered was the narrative. White people under attack in a black country. And Trump, he picked it up and ran with it, not because he cared about South Africa, but because victimizing whiteness is a political brand, especially when the voters you're courting feel like they're losing their country. But this isn't just about South Africa. It's about how America plays the long game. Back in 1965, the U.S. passed an immigration reform law that scrapped the old racist quota system thanks in large part to the civil rights movement. Black Americans fought and died to make that bill a reality. It was supposed to be a new chapter, but within 1 decade, the very law they fought for was being used to undercut their progress. New immigrant groups were welcomed in droves while black Americans were left in red-line neighborhoods, over-policed schools, and broken housing programs. That was not an accident. It was a strategy. Power doesn't just resist change, it adapts to erase the people who make change possible. Now, let's talk about who gets to be a refugee in this country. Because the United States doesn't just ask, are you in danger? It asks, do you look like you'd vote Republican? And if the answer is yes, the gates open faster than a tax loophole for billionaires. Just think about it. Haitian refugees fleeing earthquakes and political chaos. Denied, deported, left in cages under bridges. Central Americans escaping cartel violence and government collapse. Told to wait in Mexico like it's a DMV line for freedom. Africans seeking asylum from conflict zones. Often outright ignored and even more often profiled as threats to second-day land. Meanwhile, white South Africans who hold disproportionate economic power in their own country get framed as the real victims. Their wealth and whiteness get translated as legitimacy. Their fear gets called evidence. Their immigration becomes urgent. This isn't policy. This is optics. The kind that reinforces the American myth that whiteness is synonymous with innocence, civilization, and credibility. We see it in language too. Black and brown immigrants are always flooding, swarming, or invading. White ones, settling, resettling, starting new lives. One group is a crisis. The other group is a fresh start. And here's the wildest part. A lot of the people coming from black and brown countries were destabilized by the U.S. Through foreign policy, coups, sanctions, or straight up exploitation. We wreck the neighborhood, then call the neighbors illegals when they come knocking. The truth is American immigration is not broken. It's working exactly the way it was designed to. Gatekeep opportunity, weaponize race, reward whiteness with new beginnings, and punish blackness with border walls. Look, this was not just about South Africa. It wasn't about farmers. It wasn't even about immigration in itself. It was about using refugee policy as a branding move to say, see, we're not anti-immigrant, just pro-certain immigrants. And that's what makes it dangerous. Because when you open the gates for a select group, you're not just helping them, you're sending a message to everyone else. You're saying the system can work. It just won't work for you. It reinforces the idea that legitimacy is something whiteness naturally possesses, that you don't have to be starving, fleeing, or in a war zone. You just have to be pale, polite, and from a country people can find on a map without Googling. That kind of symbolism isn't harmless. It's fuel for racists. Number one, it feeds the belief that white lives are more valuable, that their discomfort is a crisis, and that any policy aimed at helping others must come with a racial disclaimer. And while it might have looked like a minor move in the news cycle, it set a precedent that even in the realm of desperation, there's a pecking order. And if you're black, brown, poor, or stateless, you're not at the top of it. Look, let's just call it what it is. America didn't open its arms to white South African refugees because of danger. It did it because of comfort, because their skin tone matched the wallpaper of this country's founding myth. And every time we say, that's not who we are, moments like this remind us, yeah, it's exactly who we are. This was a message that suffering only matters when it's marketable. That immigration only works when the immigrant looks like a real estate agent and not someone who built the building. If asylum's supposed to be about need, then the system needs therapy. Because what it's really offering is selective salvation. So the next time someone says, why don't they just come here legally? Ask them, who's they? And what do they have to look like to be let in? So when they say make America great again, they mean pre-1965, before people from non-white countries were allowed to immigrate to America. Just saying. This is the Adonis Black Show, the only news show where we laugh to keep from crying. See you next episode.